I'm at the Bet 2007 show on Saturday, and I've bumped into Ian Usher, who's doing lots of different things at the show. He's demonstrating for Adobe, he's got connections with other firms, but he is the e-learning coordinator for Buckinghamshire, and he's probably one of the most innovative people in terms of LAs or county councils in the country. Ian, can you give us a bit of sort of flavour of the show and what you are doing at the moment?
Well, I've not really seen anything that's completely innovative. I've seen lots of very exciting things that are very much in niche areas, but I've not actually seen anything that's completely transforming the way anybody's going to learn. One of the most important things at the moment is that the Vector Learning Platforms specification has just come out. So around here you've got various people who are all kind of very excited about the fact they've got the badge. In Buckinghamshire we're doing something a bit different using Moodle and Adobe Connect, and I'm working with Atomwide on that, and it's going really well. And what's interesting is that we're not in the framework, so some people are a bit nervous about that, but we did a seminar yesterday with colleagues from West Sussex where we were talking about the fact that actually, to quote Catherine Tate, we're not actually bothered. It doesn't really matter because we're establishing pedagogy and practice and communities of people learning, whereas the Vector work is very much about a functional specification. I'm less concerned about the functions, which are taken for granted wherever you work, and I'm more concerned about the fact that how do we actually use this, should we use it, and if we do, what looks good practice and what's bad practice, and there is a lot of that out there already.
I think it's important to point out that you don't need to buy from the 10 suppliers on the list, and can you tell us sort of the combination of things that you are using and some of the projects you're involved with at Buckinghamshire?
Yeah, the main thing we're using for our virtual learning environment, which is part of our learning platform, is Moodle, which is an open source virtual learning environment, and that's hosted for us by these guys at Atomwide. We're also using Adobe Connect, formerly known as Macromedia Breeze, and we're using that for video conferencing and that communication and recording of events element of that. It's also integrated with an email system, and one of the most important things we're doing is actually thinking about what an e-portfolio really should look like. I'm constantly plagued by people who are telling me that they've got a really good e-portfolio, and the closer you look, it just becomes a way of storing files, which is just like as someone once said, a USB drive in the sky, which actually doesn't have any pedagogy attached to it. There's no thought about the learning process, what the role of the learner is. So it's really interesting to look around here and see what other people's vision of an e-portfolio is. I take a view that they probably have a vision that's based on technology rather than learning, and it's very much about can we do this, and there's no question about what should we do and how should it be used and what does it mean for the learner. So we're going to have some discussions in the next few weeks about putting the learner at the centre of what we do and making sure that it's their e-portfolio and it isn't about a teacher's e-portfolio, it belongs to the student. If the student then wants to put that work into a virtual learning environment or wants to put it in anywhere they want to, then we'll make sure that happens. We'll also take into effect that kids don't live in a school bubble. They've already got things on Bebo and Photobucket and Flickr and MySpace and YouTube and things like that, and they're normally blocked by schools, but we're trying to think about creative ways in which we can start to get good examples of those sort of resources into this e-portfolio, so it actually reflects on the kids' real world and not the slightly sanitised unreal world that they have in a school.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So there are 2 points to have a little mini debate here going on. Talking to Richard Millwood about what they did at Ultralab, and he's actually revealed to us as a scoop the actual stats of pass rates from the students on the MA on the course, and they're phenomenal. And the reason why they're phenomenal is because they're embedded in those people's practices and lives. It's the same for kids. I wonder if you've got a take on the skills versus higher order thinking debate that's going on at NACE at the moment, because I find that quite amusing, that a lot of people are still bound into the sort of the tests and the skills, especially at Key Stage 3, whereas there is a contrary viewpoint that maybe if you bind things in as closely to people's lives and practices, that you will automatically be able to jump from skill to skill, because if you teach a skill set, it's outmoded the next day.
I think in a school environment, what we often find, and we're using like various products to do this, is that you don't need to teach kids skills in terms of what you might call Web 2 technologies, the new version of the internet technologies. They don't actually need them, because if they don't have them themselves, they know someone very close to them who does. One of I think the most important points from my thinking is that kids have plenty of time to faff in the evenings, whereas teachers have things to write, they have reports to publish, they probably have families to look after. Kids have plenty of time to faff and practice. So you get kids writing blogs, and it's not as if they just sat down and suddenly did it, but what they did was they actually went away and they practiced for a couple of hours one night, and once it worked, that encouraged them to go back and do some more. I think one of the most interesting things for me is the way that really innovative teachers have to do so much more work than those who don't in some respects, because if it's not supported by the school, it becomes something you do in your own time. For example, a very slightly outdated example would be the school website. If it's a geeky thing to do, you do it in the evenings because that's a geeky thing. It's not a core activity that you do in the part of your school day. However, if you're producing a paper brochure, you'd end up being given time to do that because it's a paper brochure, a glossy brochure. It's a really important thing to do, and I think those are things that aren't actually seen as core, and that will change with ICT. I think that's going to start to nudge its way in, kind of elbow its way in gently into practice and also into the lives of staff. And it's also going to be, there's going to be a demographic change once you get, who knows how long it will be, but once you get people coming through who've been studying while the Web 2 thing's been happening, and who've been studying while the internet hasn't been a piece of technology, it's just been a reality in their lives. That will then start to change teaching, and I imagine in some schools it is now, but maybe wait until they get to senior positions. Maybe they wait to get to senior positions in Vector. Who knows what will happen?
I was talking to Hannah Jones of the NCSL on the Slick course, and she was saying, all right, they do the 2 days, and now they're trying to get LAs to sort of cooperate and schools to cooperate. But it's my view that you need a community, you need a localised community, and I think you're sort of building that in Buckinghamshire in many ways because of the contacts you have with innovative teachers and innovative consultants. And can you just tell us a little bit about how you're building an infrastructure of sort of CPD for people as it's going on to create exemplars within that system?
What we do in Buckinghamshire with our virtual learning environment, for example, we started off fairly small with a few schools, and I worked in some schools just to provide sort of one-to-one or 1 to 2 or 3 support with people who are using it. But we're now starting to get to the stage where there's enough interest, and I think this particularly comes from primaries, where people are going to be able to start to almost gossip about it, and it's going to be transferred by gossip rather than policy, which is always very interesting. When you hear someone, or when a head teacher hears of someone doing something good down the road and it's affecting their results, and it's changing the way the school works, that's not the kind of the politics of shame or anything, but it actually just spurs other people on to do things. So we're now starting to launch our primary school Moodle learning environments in batches of about 15. So we train them as a cohort, we get them together for a few months, we do a bit of scaffolding, if you like, to start to enable them to understand what it might be used for and start to feed off each other. Because ultimately, there's only one of me, there's 240 schools, there's goodness knows how many teachers, staff and students, and it's actually by sharing it from another teacher rather than someone like me turning up saying, you should do this, which always goes down like a lead balloon sometimes. But actually, when you hear it from another teacher who's not an ICT geek, let's be honest, that's when it starts to become real, and that's when you can actually start to see its relevance for you. So we're starting off with something like that. We're trying to build an online community. It's going to take a long time. No one's being naive about this. It's going to take a while to do. But I think the important thing is that we're gradually starting to transform what people can expect. And examples of schools that we've seen, some of whom are slick schools, some of whom aren't anything to do with NCSL at all. We're starting to see, even in little incremental bits, the way that things are changing. And talk to the kids, it's incredibly exciting. They want to use it more. They can't believe they're going to go to secondary schools and not have this facility. So I think it's the primary schools that are going to bounce the secondary schools into action, and we're starting to see a little bit of that already.
Thank you very much, Ian.